It's been a long, long time. Still I want to get busy to you, girl. Yeah. And John said I was there, never on time.
Hi and welcome to the Talkingbass podcast with me, your host Ellen O'Reilly, and my guest today, the amazing Rich Brown. Hey Rich.
Hello.
How's everything with you?
It's good. Things are super busy, but it's been a good run, which is kind of weird to say during a pandemic. But I've been lucky, and things have been great. I feel guilty saying that. That sounds like the worst thing you can say because people are like having a hard time.
Oh, it's no worries. Well, what's been keeping you so busy then?
I'm teaching a lot. I'm also recording with different producers who send me tracks to play and send back. And I'm also just keeping myself busy. Like I started my own YouTube channel, so I'm developing content for that all the time. And yeah, just trying to keep myself busy and sane. I'm practicing like crazy. I just finished the school year. I was teaching at Humber College here in Toronto, and that just finished up. I'm also doing kind of a bi-weekly radio show for a jazz website called jazzcast.ca, where I play a bunch of great music, and everyone should listen. Yeah, all of that stuff is keeping me very busy these days.
That's good, but I bet you can't wait to get back out touring.
Oh, yeah. There's something going on now where I'm sort of virtually on the road as we speak. I play with a really amazing trio called the Jeremy Ledbetter Trio. It's myself, and Jeremy plays piano. He's a great composer, and Larnell Lewis on drums. And just before the pandemic hit, we were supposed to hit the road for a couple of weeks. And of course, all that stuff got canceled. But Jeremy got in touch with all of the jazz festival directors, and asked if we could pre-record a set and send these pre-recorded sets to these different festivals. And we've done 3 so far, where we just go into a studio and basically record a concert without an audience. And I think there's 4 more coming up. We have to go into the studio again and record 4 more shows for 4 different jazz festivals who are basically doing their whole festival online this year. So, yeah, as much as I am looking forward to heading back on the road and doing this live in front of people again, we're still managing to find ways to make things happen musically, and we're still getting together to play, of course, under very different circumstances and situations. But it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah, it's a weird life we're living at the minute, but it looks like we're not going to have to live it for too much longer, because I'm definitely missing the real world.
Yeah, same. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Rich, tell us about yourself. Like, what was your musical upbringing like? How, what led you to pick up the bass?
I started as a guitar player, and I guess it was in high school when I realized that there were a million other guitar players and no bass players, and everyone needed a bass player. So I thought I would make the switch. I was like, well, how hard can it be just to play bass if you're a guitarist? But it's hard. And I realized that like almost right off the bat, and it got me really excited about learning this new instrument, and I got into it. I started playing like Police songs, and then I got into Level 42, and those guys were my heroes. And then one day, as I was starting to get into the whole jazz thing, I turned the radio on one day, and the host came on to the show and said, we're dedicating our 2-hour program to Jaco Pastorius, who just passed away, like either that day or the day before or whatever it was. And I was like, who's Jaco Pastorius? So the first tune they played was the song Continuum. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And my life changed at that moment. I was like, I need to know everything about this man, Jaco. I'm sure every bass player has their Jaco moment. But that was it for me. And it really motivated me to just try to be the best that I could be at this instrument. And, you know, not obviously not be the next Jaco, but get to that point where I feel comfortable to express myself and play anything that I'm hearing or feeling on this instrument the way that he did. And from there, you know, I got into different groups, and, you know, I joined like a Rush cover band.
That's such a Canadian thing to do.
Well, that is the Canadian thing to do. If you're playing bass in Canada, yeah, you got to join a Rush cover band at some point. If you haven't played Tom Sawyer, you can't call yourself a Canadian bass player. But yeah, it's just, you know, from there, it's just a matter of like, you know, getting out into the community. This is, you know, a lot of people ask me if they have any advice for young musicians who are just starting out. And you got to get out there and be seen and find as many opportunities as you can to just play in front of people, because you never know who's going to be listening. You never know who's going to be in the audience or watching, and there are many opportunities that could lead to more opportunities. So that's what I did. I just got out and played. And the more I did, the more I met people and met musicians that I really wanted to collaborate with. And it just kind of, you know, grew from there.
Yeah. So was there much of a jam scene in Toronto, or was it just a case of playing with as many bands as possible?
Yeah, that was the case. Definitely the latter, where, you know, you play in one band and that introduces you to a group of musicians who are connected to another group of musicians. And, you know, it's like a pyramid where you constantly are getting called for new and different projects and you know, making yourself known to the entire scene.
Yeah, it's like a musician's pyramid scheme.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Except no one's getting ripped off. It's all good.
Well, no.
So those early influences, like now before you had your Jaco moment, where it was all, you know, the Police and stuff like that, was that your introduction to jazz then, per se?
Yeah, it was. I mean, Level 42, in the 80s, they were considered like a jazz funk band. So I wanted to know a little bit more about that. And that led me to, you know, groups like Weather Report. And I was listening to a lot of Mike Stern. There's a band here in Canada, a real sort of seminal band from Montreal called UZEB. Alain Caron is the bass player in that band. He was a huge influence. So the whole sort of 80s fusion thing became a huge part of my life through checking out, you know, these bands that were influenced by jazz. And then from there, I thought it'd be a good idea to go learn more about the tradition of the music. And then I got into like Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Ornette Coleman and all these different influences that were more, not straight ahead, but more in the tradition, I guess.
And did you go and have any formal training then in jazz?
I didn't. Yeah, all of my jazz education was just through listening, going into my basement and learning an album from top to bottom and trying to learn solos and trying to learn the vocabulary, which I'm still trying to do, and learn how to improvise. It was all by ear, through listening to those artists.
Do you think that learning by ear, because you're kind of like cutting out the middleman of getting weighed down with too much theory or reading too much or something? You know, do you think that like when you're learning stuff by ear and you're just going from the fingers to the brain, that is kind of like it helps you learn how to improvise a little bit quicker or more organically or more naturally? Do you think?
I think so. I feel like it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because the one main plus is that the ear training that I've done over the years has really helped me to get off the page, as they say, a little faster than some of the other band members. So I'm able to memorize the music a little quicker, which allows me to really be in the moment and not have my face in the page all night. But I think the formal training would have been beneficial to me in other ways, like just learning the theory, being a better reader, having more of the standard repertoire under my fingers. I don't really know a whole lot of standards, but I feel like if I had gone through that sort of training and gone to school, then all of those skills would be much sharper than they are now. That would be the main sort of downside. But I think the two balance each other out. I like when someone comes up to me after a set and goes, "Man, you're the only one up there who's not reading music." It's like, yeah, but that was because of the years of work before that sort of led me to that moment. But I do feel like there's an advantage as far as like learning the music and getting inside the music and then just being able to express yourself.
So did you then, because you're being primarily self-taught then, were you? Or did you have any other tutors along the way?
No, I'm self-taught, yeah.
That's great. Like, so does that mean that a lot of times being session players, like sometimes every now and again, some work will come in where they're looking for a reader,
Yeah.
Did that happen to you, and did you have to like then go ahead and teach yourself?
Yeah, here's what I do to get around that. Usually when somebody calls me for a gig, the first thing I do is tell them to send me the music, like the audio and the charts, as far in advance as they possibly can. And then I just spend as much time as I can. The goal for me is to have the entire set memorized before the first rehearsal. So if I can make that happen, then, the leaders always appreciate that.
That's great, because that's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. I was trying to tease it out. You're saying he's just as naughty as me. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, it's the truth. For me, it's the best way. Because I don't want to be reading on stage. I'm a terrible reader. So I try to keep myself out of situations where I have to sight read as much as possible. So I make sure that I urge anyone who calls to just send me the music, like now. As soon as we get off the phone, send me the music.
So have you noticed that your ear is just that, like your relative pitch and that is so much better than your fellow musos?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like I can hold my own. Whether or not it's better or worse than anyone else, that's might not be for me to say. But
right. Oh, fair enough. Sorry, I put you in a tricky spot.
That's okay.
Spot there.
I'll say yeah, and then somebody will call me up and be like, "Hey, man, I heard what you said about your ear being better than mine. I challenge you."
I challenge you to an ear battle.
Ear duels.
Ear duels, yeah. Doo-doo. What's that?
Yeah.
That would be the nerdiest battle of all time, I reckon.
Yeah. No viewers for that video. 0.
Absolutely. So when you're self-taught now, being self-taught as well though, going into like jazz fusion and all that is hard work, like especially years ago when we couldn't necessarily slow things down and all that.
Yeah.
Like, so what was that like, going right, I'm just going to play this Jacko tape now and I'm just going to figure it all out, because it's some bits, it's like, what is going on?
Exactly. But I saw it as kind of a game, and it was a cool challenge for me to figure things out that way. Like, during that time, during my sort of development, I would literally practice for like 12 hours a day. And that was only because I would put an album on and then just try to learn the entire album. So I would put like a Weather Report album on and learn all the tunes. And I didn't want to leave my chair until I learned all of those tunes. So that, that was the thing for me. It was fun. It was kind of a fun game. And through doing that, you start to recognize different patterns. And the more you recognize the patterns, the more you can visualize them on the fingerboard. When I hear a major triad, I know what that sounds like, but I also know what it looks like on the fingerboard. And then you start to hear more complex patterns and recognize those in the same way. So it was kind of fun for me. And
did you eventually teach yourself lots of theory and then incorporate that to what you were learning by ear?
Yeah, that came with the help of a mentor when I was 22. There was a guy here by the name of Bill Grove who had a radio show that I would listen to every Monday morning. It was an amazing show that introduced me to a lot of different music. So I became a fan of this guy, and then I started to just phone him up and request certain things. And oddly enough, a lot of the stuff that I would request would be like things that featured Jocko, just records that I didn't have, that I heard about, that he would have, and he would just play them. And after a few calls, he just was like, "Wait a second, are you a bass player?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Are you any good?" And I didn't know how to answer that. And then he said that he had this show coming up, and his bass player was leaving to go on tour with his big pop band. And would I be into coming out and auditioning for the band? So I did, and I got the gig. But one of the first things he did was he put like a lead sheet in my face. Like we played and we improvised, and it was great. And then when he gave me this lead sheet, I was like, I have no idea what any of this stuff means. So he said, "Listen, you can't read any of this. So here's what I want you to do. You still have the gig, but I want you to come over to the rehearsals. We rehearsed every week, every Saturday." And he said, "I want you to come out to the rehearsals an hour early, and I'm going to sit you down at the piano and just show you some basic theory." And that was great, invaluable. That was like 4 years of college right there.
Amazing. So what was the stuff he showed you like?
Well, he showed me the real basics. Like he said, this is a 2-5-1 chord progression. This is a song called Stella by Starlight. This is what you can do over these, and this is why you can play this over a 5 chord, and just all the basic elements of theory. And then he just taught me how to read like a basic lead sheet. We didn't really get into reading, complex notations or things like that, but he really gave me an understanding of the basics that I don't think I would have been able to get there on my own. Everyone needs a mentor, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And so after you did that, I'm kind of just wondering about your career. So like you were 17 years old when you started playing bass, was it?
Yes, I was 17.
17, that's great. I love it because so many people I interviewed are like, "Oh, I started when I was 12 or 13 or whatever," and I'm like, I started when I was 17, and I'm like, feeling bad about it.
Yeah,
so it's great.
I think I started playing guitar when I was 4. But even then, it was just sort of like goofing around on the guitar. I didn't really take anything that seriously. And I took a couple of guitar lessons, and they bored me to tears, literally. So then I just put the guitar down. And then, it was when I was 17 that I just thought, oh, man, this could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got into the jazz side of things then?
It was around the same time. Because I turned the television on and I heard an interview, maybe with Wynton Marsalis. This sounds like the kind of thing Wynton Marsalis would say. He said that jazz is the most difficult music to play. and the fact that everything was improvised really intrigued me. I was like, because, you know, he spoke about jazz, and then there was jazz playing in the background, obviously. And I'd heard jazz before, but I didn't really understand it. And I had no idea that everything was improvised. I was like, whoa, they're making all this up? Like, how? I want to know how to do that. So, yeah, I think that was around the same time, 17, 18 years old, when I heard that interview, and I thought, okay, well, this is where I want to go. Thanks for everything, Rush. I'm going to go over here now.
So now you also teach at the Scott Space lessons over there at the Academy, like, and you teach improvisation. So how do you approach, like, first of all, how would you approach teaching improvisation for a complete beginner? Now, not a complete beginner bass player, but beginning to improvise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess there are a couple of directions we can go. One is more ear-based, and then the other would be more based on, you know, learning the modes, which I think is the most valuable tool in the shed for any musician. But, you know, for the ear-based training, I like to do this thing where you create something based on one note. And then you can create, let's say, a melodic cell based on that one note, where you have two notes on either side that sound good. You don't even necessarily have to know what the notes are. But if you can find two notes next on either side of that sort of focal point that sound good against the harmony, then you can create different little phrases and almost create like a call and response sort of vibe, where you have your 3-note cell happening here with the focal point being at the beginning, but then you have this other 3-note cell happening here with the focal point being at the end. And you can just create these little melodic phrases, and then you can keep building your cells by one note at a time. Add another note to this cell, and then add another note to this cell, until you have a whole group of notes in two areas where you can create melodic lines going back and forth in this real sort of call and response way. So then you put together a melodic sort of thematic solo or improvisation based on just using your ear. And, you know, there doesn't have to be any discussion about what the notes are, what the scale is, or anything like that. You're using your ear, and you're using your musical instinct to improvise.
That is very cool. I've never heard of anyone describe, you know, learning to improvise like that. Like, you know what I mean? Just having, you know, just two notes near your well, not even your, it's not even your root. It's just a note that you find that sounds good. It could be the fifth, it could be a flat 7, it could be whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. I kind of like that idea.
Yeah,
because anyone
cool.
can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very cool. Are you plugged in at all? I'd love to hear an example.
Oh, wow. I'm not, but I should.
Right.
Wait, you know, it wouldn't take me long to plug in.
Yeah.
You got a second?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I'll do that now.
I'm mad to picture what this is going to be like.
Okay.
Oh yes. So this is your VF series bass, isn't it? F bass.
This one is actually, this is kind of my main instrument. It's made by Kenneth Lawrence. It's a KL Unity 6.
I normally don't ask for examples, but just because you were telling me about this thing, I'm like, yeah, I want to see it.
Okay, so I'll play an A. So there's an A. And then I can find a note. That sounds good to me. So let's say I just think about like that note and how it sounds against that open A. So from there, I can find two notes above that note that sound good against the A. And then I can find two notes below that note. So now I have these two melodic cells that I can work with. So now I can create a phrase and then repeat that phrase on the other cell. And then I can keep adding notes to my phrase. So here's another note. So now my 3-note cell is a 4-note cell. So then I can play a phrase based on that 4-note cell. And then repeat that phrase on the other cell. But I'm always using my ear to make sure I know exactly how to resolve and what notes I can kind of hang out on and what notes I can use as a bit more tension. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful, beautiful tone out of that bass.
Thank you. Yeah. I love this thing.
Lovely. All right. Class. And then you were talking about then modes as well.
Yeah, the modes. That's going to take much more than what we have time for. But I feel like the thing that we sort of forget about the modes is that, you know, there's 7 scales, but they're really just one scale, right? They're just, they're the same 7 notes in different sort of positions. So, you know, the basic thing that I usually tell people about the modes is that, you know, if you're playing in C major or if you're playing in D minor or A minor, then all the modes of C major are just going to work over any of those chords. So you can put on like a drone on any of those chords. So if, you know, we're talking about A here. So if I keep that A going, then I can play all the modes of C major. So that's C major. Here's D Dorian, the 2nd mode. So on and so forth. All the modes are going to sound good against any of the chords associated with the key of C major. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember when we're learning the modes. Because a lot of people say, oh man, it's really hard to just solo over one chord. But it's not, because you have 7 scales available to you at any time.
Mm-hmm. And within those scales, you have your pentatonics, you have your 4-note arpeggios, your triads, you know, it's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very important, because this is the thing that I like to do when I warm up. Like I learned all of my sort of sequential scale patterns and I use them now to warm up. So like, you know, thirds, 3-note patterns, 4-note patterns, triads, chords. And then what I do is every time I pick up this instrument to practice, I will say, okay, well, today I'm going to warm up by playing alternating sixths on a Phrygian scale. Just pick a random sequence and then a random mode and just spend 5 or 10 minutes just like working out the patterns on that mode. Yeah. And it's a great way to just keep everything super sharp, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I came across, like, you probably have the same story, sequences, like, you know, skips of thirds and fifths and all that. And it was a Jacob Stories video. And I was like, oh, God, that's a lot of work. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I had the same video. And, I was just so into Jocko.
Yeah. I got as far as the fifths.
Yeah.
6, 7. So I was like, no, my head.
Yeah. I wore that. I had that on VHS. I wore that thing out. Like every day I would practice another section from that video. It was another one of those things that really just sort of changed my life, because I think, you know, my interest in sequential patterns literally came from that video. Just watching that video and seeing the way that he would, you know, play ascending thirds. I was like, oh, I want to be able to do that. I want my hand to look as comfortable as his does when he plays those patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. It is tough when you go past fifths, though. I mean.
Yeah, it is. I feel like I have my favorites when it comes to those sequential patterns. I don't really use fourths or fifths that often, but I use I use sixths a lot. I just think that they're the most beautiful interval. Like, it sounds like classical music when you play those things. Like, if I play alternating sixth, that's just a gorgeous sound.
Sounds like a Bach piece or something.
It totally does, and that's what everyone says whenever I play that exercise.
When it comes to, I totally agree with you about that. When it comes to modes, I used to have an argument with an ex-boyfriend who was a guitarist, and his view to modes were like, oh, it's all about, but it's a different colour, it's a different flavour, it's a different thing over that chord. And I was like, well, yeah, it is, but it's also opens up the fretboard to being able to play all across the neck in that given key.
Absolutely.
And he used to argue with me and say, no, you're wrong. And I was like, no, I'm definitely right. I think I'm definitely right. Like, it's just,
I think you're definitely right.
Giving me this nonsense. So go away with you. He is since removed from my life.
Yes.
Don't
you
give
go,
me this.
girl.
You don't know nothing about modes. Get out of my life.
Yeah.
Hardcore.
I feel like that's the main sort of advantage to really getting a deep understanding of the modes, is that you can play anywhere on the neck and it's going to work, because all you're doing is you're just finding different ways to play the same 7 notes. Come on.
Exactly, yeah. You might throw in a bit of chromaticism every now and again and everyone will think you're a genius.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of it, because you can see where you can fit those chromatics in just in the makeup of the mode itself. So it just works.
Absolutely. But when you're playing fusion though, do you ever branch out from those major modes into, like, you know the way you can use modes from the harmonic minor and melodic minor scales, so the super Locrian and Lydian dominant and all that? Do you ever borrow from them?
I guess I do, but I always try. I'm a bit of a dum-dum, so I always try to find the simplest ways to do that, and then I still just relate it to the modes. So if I'm thinking of like the harmonic minor scale, then the way that I really see it is more like a Dorian scale with a major seventh. So if I can think in those terms, then I can take a lot of the information that I've already practiced and just adapt by adding that major seventh to the scale. But I also know that major seventh is going to provide, not to quote your ex-boyfriend, but it's going to provide a different color, like a particular color. So if I'm playing over like a minor chord, then I can play Dorian. But then if I want that color, it's like I'm looking at a palette and I know that major seventh is going to be a certain thing. So I know that I can get to that at any time through those means, I guess.
So
Nice.
your career is amazing. I mean, you've played with loads of, I mean, jazz being your main thing, but you've played with loads of amazing artists, like including Vernon Reid. I mean, that is cool. How did that come about?
That came about because we played together with this really great guitarist by the name of James Blood Ulmer. And I think he's in his 70s now. But James, he's a guitarist who worked closely with Ornette Coleman in the 70s. And then decided he wanted to just play the blues, like just straight up blues. And Vernon was a big fan of his. So he decided to put together this just straight up blues band where we would play like, old Howlin' Wolf and really old blues songs. So those two guys, Vernon and James, they co-lead this band called Memphis Blood. And every once in a while I get the amazing opportunity to play with these guys. And Vernon is such a cool and hilarious guy, and obviously an incredible guitar player who's constantly, trying to figure out new ways to play the instrument and new things to do with the instrument. It's very inspiring to just be on the same stage with that guy and with James, like amazing musicians. I'm so blessed, I have to say. it's been a wild ride.
Like when you tour, have you come over to Europe before? Or?
Yeah, quite a few times. I used to play with a band called Dapp Theory, and we were in Europe a lot. And then also, well, with a few different bands. I toured Europe with a saxophone player named Donnie McCaslin, and another alto saxophone player from New York named Rudresh Mahanthapa. And I can't remember what year it was. It must have been like 2014 or 15. We played the Cork Jazz Festival.
I've played
this
that.
Beautiful church. Yeah. Do you know the church? I can't remember what it was called, but we played this really gorgeous church. And we had a blast. It was great.
Oh, I love the Cork Jazz Festival. I played it.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Ireland. Sorry, it took me ages to just say it. I'm from Ireland.
I would never have guessed.
I know, right? But yeah, Cork Jazz Festival, absolutely loads of Cork that. And
Yeah.
But what about Ronnie Scott's and the London jazz scene?
Yeah, I played Ronnie Scott's twice. Once, oh shoot, there was a singer here who got a 3-night gig at Ronnie Scott's, and we also got Pee Wee Ellis to be the special guest in the band, and he was fantastic. Pee Wee Ellis is he was one of the horn players in James Brown's band, for people who don't know, and he was so amazing. And there was a problem with me because I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but there was a problem with visas, and we couldn't get the visas in time. So we had to say that we were tourists, which meant that I wasn't allowed to bring my bass. So they rented this horrible, like $200 Fender Squier for me to play at Ronnie Scott's for 3 nights with Pee Wee Ellis in the band. And I was struggling with this thing every night. Like, I just couldn't get it to sound good. And one night I was backstage. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
Yeah, of course you can. I'm on it.
And one night I was backstage just like tuning this instrument and just trying to find a way to play it. This was like the 3rd night of the gig. And Pee Wee Ellis, I felt this hand on my shoulder. It was Pee Wee. He leaned over to me and he said, "You know you're playing the shit out that bass, right? You know that, right?" And I was like, "Thanks, man." Yeah, that was my best moment at Ronnie Scott's. Nothing on stage, just that moment itself.
I had a moment back. It sounds bad. It's not that bad. Backstage at Ronnie Scott's, where I think I robbed Billy Cobham's dinner.
Oh wow!
He was eating his dinner, and I was a bit drunk. And my friend is the bass player, Michael Mondesier. And
oh man, I love that guy.
Oh, I love Michael. He's so wonderful. Anyway, he was
Wow.
all like, "Hey, come on, Alan, we're backstage. Come on in." And I was like, "I assure Michael, I'm a bit drunk." And he was like, "Come on, it's grand." I'm Irish. It's expected, you know. What do you mean I'm out on the evening sober? Doesn't happen. So I just bungled in backstage. And there's Billy just in the corner, you know, having his dinner, being all nice and polite, and he's such a lovely guy, you know. And I was like, Billy. I don't think he likes being called Billy. It's Bill Covan, but I kept calling him Billy. And I was like hugging him there trying to eat his dinner. I was like, "What is that? Is that mac and cheese? I love mac and cheese." And I just started, I took his fork off and started eating his dinner. Like, that's terrible, isn't it? But he laughed.
That's amazing.
He laughed.
Well, he laughed.
He laughed and we got a photo and it was all good. I was like, God, what an idiot I am.
That blows my mind.
Yeah,
That's an amazing story.
I'm just so cheeky. So like, but come here, next time you're in, I'm half in Ireland, half in London normally, right? So if you're ever in London or Ireland again and you need a bass, I've got loads I can lend you.
Oh man, yeah, I can see that. Wow. Much better than the whatever Squire was that I got.
Yeah.
That's quite a collection.
Nice Sandbergs, very low action because I'm very lazy. As I said,
Yeah.
I don't like pushing too hard. It's like,
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I could see your by your even that little example you did there. Your touch is quite light and gentle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, very early on, I learned because I was playing a little bit too hard. So I did this trick that I later learned. Gary Willis would do the same thing, but I would go on stage and crank the amp to where it was just like too loud, and then try to play with a lighter touch. So then anytime I heard that the bass was too loud, it meant that I was playing too hard. So then I would just lighten up my touch, and then that sort of became my technique after a while.
And do you find that helps you articulate notes better? Or, I mean, having a lighter touch, has that helped you express yourself better musically?
It does, because I feel, one of the main things about playing and being able to express yourself is you have to be relaxed. You have to find yourself in the right headspace. And playing too hard might be an indication of a few things that could really impede your ability to express yourself. So you might be feeling anxiety, which might force you to play a little bit harder and a little bit too loud, and just being too forceful with the music. So if I find that's happening, then there's also a headspace that I have to sort of reach where I think, okay, if I'm playing too hard, why is that? Am I nervous about something? Is there something else going on? So I try to center myself and really be as relaxed as possible. And once I can get into that place where I'm just super relaxed and calm about everything, then it's a lot easier for me to think about the music, be in the moment, and respond to the music in a way that allows me to express myself in the context of whatever piece that I'm playing. So this way I'm not playing the same stuff over and over again. I'm really being in the moment, and I'm not playing the same solos and the same licks on every solo every night. Like, I can really think about what's going on at the time.
Cool. And how do you get yourself relaxed and in the zone? Because sometimes there could be a lot going on. It can be quite stressful at times,
Yeah, it can be. But, I don't know. Gratitude is a serious thing. And I feel like whenever I get into those situations where my head's not in it, the easiest thing you can do is just sort of look around and realize that you have an audience in front of you. There are people there who took the time out of their evening to come and support what you do. And no one's there to see you fail. And everyone's there just to give you props and enjoy what you have to put out into the universe. And then when you realize that, you just think, oh, I have this responsibility to these people. And I'm very fortunate to be in this position to just be able to do this. And as soon as I realize that, then there's a calm that just comes over me, and then I can get up on stage and do what I have to do, and create this sort of beautiful reciprocal energy that's just give and take between the band and the audience. So gratitude is a huge thing to help me to get to that place.
That is great advice as well. The attitude of gratitude.
Yeah, the attitude of gratitude. Why is it taking me this long before I've even heard that phrase? Oh my God, that's my whole life.
That's it. But I mean, that's like the most important thing, not just musically, I think, just in life in general. If you're getting
Absolutely.
annoyed with stuff, you should just calm down and say, hang on, what can I be grateful for now? All right, I'm not living in a mansion, but I'm not on the street, you know what I mean? It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I heard, one of my favorite musicians is an alto player and composer from New York. His name is Henry Threadgill, who's just a phenomenal person. And he was being asked about success and being a successful musician. And he was like, listen, when I go home, my fridge is full and my bills are paid. I don't live in a mansion. I'm not a rich person by any means. But the fact that I can play music and not be a, literal starving artist, there's a level of success that has to be acknowledged there. So, I don't know. I feel like that's key for me. For a lot of people, we have to just sort of realize that we're not failures just because we're not whatever. Coldplay. Like, who cares?
I can bet they never heard of Modes.
Right. Modes.
Oh, that's a name of our new album, you know?
Yeah, Modes.
Could be. Sounds like it could be.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Rich, what's next for you then? What's your plan post-COVID when the world opens up?
What's my plan? I've got a couple of irons in the fire. I guess I would be, I recorded a solo album, like a solo bass album a few years ago, which is available on my Bandcamp.
Is this the one that won the award?
No, that was the last sort of band project that I did.
Okay.
That was an album called A Bang that I released in 2016. Yeah. And it was nominated for a Juno Award, like a Canadian Grammy or whatever. But the album I did before that was a solo bass record. And I think I would like to do another one of those. And this is probably like the best time to do it because, everyone's isolated and sort of in their own sort of spaces. So I think that might be the next thing for me. I'm also working on another band project. I'm trying to write some music for something coming up that I'd like to release maybe in the next year. And I want to keep the channel going. The YouTube channel has been growing slowly but surely. It's called The Brownstone, and it's on YouTube. And if you're into learning more about the instrument, I post little lessons, a lot like the stuff that we talked about today. I post video lessons every week. So I'm going to keep going with that. There are a few irons between that and these two sort of recording projects and whatever else might be happening once the world opens up again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where can we all keep an eye on you? Like, what's your website, Instagram, all that stuff?
Yeah, my Instagram is Rich the Algorithm. All lowercase, all one word. That's probably the best place. I mean, I'm on Facebook and Twitter, but I don't really use those as often. So Instagram is probably the best place to get me, and please check out the YouTube channel. It's great to see all the positive response. People are really into bass lessons, which works out well for everyone wins.
Absolutely.
And then there's the Bandcamp page where you can buy the 3 albums that I've released. Hopefully more.
Brilliant. All right, Rich. Well, thanks very much, and hopefully I'll see you on the road in a couple of months when we can. We're all vaccinated.
Yes.
We're able to rock out in public
Absolutely.
with people.
You can have my mac and cheese anytime.
Brilliant. All right, Rich. Thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.